Hi, everybody, and welcome inside the CET studios. I'm Brian Roth. Next to me, Cory Lopez and Marty Cesario. Well, for the first time ever, CET had the 4A and 5A state football championships. We were out in Vesco Field last week, and what a day. We had an absolute blast covering two excellent football games. In 5A, how about the start for those Pomona Panthers? Looked like they were shot out of a cannon, up 16-0, 4.5 minutes into the game, but how about the resolve of the Mustangs of Mullet? Dave Logan and his bunch came back to win that game. Meanwhile, Class 4A, we thought we'd get a shootout between Longmont and Heritage. And, well, Marty Cesario, you were up there in the booth along with Cory calling that game, and a shootout is what we got.
Yeah, we actually almost got worn out. I thought the trainers were going to have to come up and help Cory and I out. It was so tough to take notes and keep track of everything. Greibel, the way he runs his offense, pitching and catching with Shane Opitz, the wide receiver, and then blasting away. It wasn't just all through the passing game, blasting away with the run with Blair Zimmerman and Seth Myers. On the other hand, for the Longmont Trojans, you got Jake Johnson running all over the place, using his wide receiver core. At one point there was 28-18. We thought, Heritage was going to take control, and then in just 1 minute 51 seconds, Johnson leads them down for not one but two different scores, a touchdown and a field goal, 28-28 at halftime. It was amazing. Like you're saying, Brian, it was a shootout through 24 minutes of play.
Yeah, it really was. And here's the deal. We saw that with Longmont before. Marty, I know you saw that with Brian in the regular season game with Heritage as well. It was one of those, well, here they go, and now it's going to be a shootout, and we got to halftime, and suddenly there's some adjustments that are made. It was amazing to see the pace of the game. It was totally different, and you could see the three and outs coming with Longmont. They really struggled with getting their defense off the field, and that was the same problem they had against Greeley West during the regular season. You thought maybe that all of that had been corrected, certainly, when they got into the playoffs. It got so hot. It was such a shootout against Pine Creek. They beat the defending state champions to get there. Something happened, and I think that was really the Eagles' defense. That's what happened to them. They made the best adjustments. It was interesting, though, just the pace of the game. The very beginning, you get the first 24 minutes, and suddenly it's a totally different game. And what a drive at the end by Heritage. I mean, that is a state championship drive.
Yeah, talking to head coach Mike Greibel about the second half stand-up performance by his defense, said, listen, we started tackling. He goes, we were in the right spot the entire game in that first half. We just couldn't tackle, but they certainly got the job done. And another story, obviously, in that football game, and we featured it at the halftime segment, is the fact that you have a good group of seniors there for Heritage. And boy, they were all little kids growing up playing youth football all the way up to high school. A lot of people thought perhaps they were going to win it last year. Didn't get it done. Come back this year, senior year, and then you have the father-son story as well.
It's kind of nice you're talking about Steppen, Zimmerman, Greibel, of course, Opitz, all part of that group. Blake Schaefer was a big part of that defense and what they did in the second half. I just think, like you're saying, it's just a gorgeous thing. And, you tie in the fact that Coach Young, the offensive coordinator, along with Coach Greibel, I mean, they've watched those kids, like Coach Greibel had mentioned in the press conference, since they were little Tigers, all the way up to this culminating event, a beautiful story. They win the state championship, hoisting it, as you saw on our broadcast on CET Sports, hoisting the trophy up in the air now that they're 17 years old.
Between the two teams, there was almost 800 yards, total yards. A lot of that for Longmont came, of course, in that first half before they got shut down. But time of possession also real telling. About 31 minutes is how long Heritage had the football, and a lot of that came with that 7 minutes, almost 8-minute drive toward the end of the game. I mean, that was just impressive. That's taking a game over and finishing it out. And you're right, maybe a little bit of anger from the year before. They should have been there last year. They certainly got it done this year.
And one more thing I think we have to point out is Jake Johnson, quarterback for the Longmont Trojans, gets hurt in this football game, and they kind of went away from him a little bit, and you could tell he just wasn't at 100%. And not saying that would make a difference, but it certainly has some effect on the outcome of the football game.
Well, and I think that's kind of ironic, the way that it finishes out, because on that side of the bracket, you had quarterbacks that were all hurt in Class 4A, as it turns out, because for Greeley West, and it happened against Longmont, where you had Sean Blackmer that went down during the regular season. So he goes down. Longmont doesn't end up winning that game, but Greeley West is on that same side of the bracket, so they've got to go in with the Gomez kid, who played very well going in. But then you think about it, also the quarterback for Wheat Ridge got hurt too. Charlie Land went down, and you had Ocello that had to come in on that side of the bracket. So it was just such a wild ride in Class 4A.
Yep, most certainly was, but Heritage, At the end of that wild ride, they were crowned the state champions. Okay, how about Class 5A, and what a game from Invesco Field. The quick start by Pomona, they're up 16-0. And this is a Mullen football team that had never been punched in the mouth like that before, that they really had never trailed in the entire season. All of a sudden, they're trailing 16-0. And boy, did they respond. And I think that was one of the most impressive things that we saw the entire day, is how Mullen, who was in a situation they had never been in before, responded to come away and get the win.
You know, when you talk about the Pomona Panthers, you shouldn't be surprised. They only have one loss. You know, one of the top teams in Jeffco, which is one of those squads that put 5 of 8 squads into the quarterfinals of this particular tournament in 5A. Coach Logan kept mentioning he's got the Jeffco ties, blue-collar kind of a culture over there, so they will come and bring the physicality. Did they have the personnel? Well, like you mentioned, you know, if they put up 16, you got to add the fact that Mullen clearly came into that contest a little bit off. But as you're talking about, Brian, 27 consecutive points by Mullen, and the defense all of a sudden shored things up and survived the late rally to get the win.
Yeah, and Cory, how about that Mullen defense? And again, they give up that big 57-yard run, and they end up giving up 338 yards of total offense. I know in the grand scheme of things, 338 isn't a huge offensive day, but against the Mullen defense, it's a big day, 338 and 24 points.
Well, and they'd only given up 14 points in the previous games leading up to the championship game, and suddenly out of the box the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, you're down 16-0. I think it was a little shocking. Jay Madden and his coaching staff did a fantastic job. They figured something out, and here's the deal. We knew this going in. Pomona matched up well against Mullen when it came to size. It was the speed that was going to get him. And in the end, I think it was the speed, and it was Mullen playing 4 quarters of football that ended up getting it done.
Yeah, they certainly did. And that's a Pomona football team. If you take away a holding call with about a minute and a half to go, Marty, they're on the 25-yard line looking at a first down and 10.
I was already down on the sidelines talking with the guys from Chassa, kind of preparing for Mullen's celebration and, you know, and victory speeches and all that. And all of a sudden, Grimes gets down to the 38-yard line. A well-represented Pomona group explodes on the west sideline there in the stands, and you're starting to feel that. But like you said, then the holding penalty, then a couple of pushes backwards by the Mullen defense, who said, no. And then, you know, obviously the Mustangs got to pull things out.
Well, congratulations to Mullen, their 7th ever state championship. And, you know, congratulations to Dave Logan as well, because, listen, that's his 5th overall state championship. Obviously, the one at A West, Columbine, now 3 at Mullen. And I think that certainly it puts him in the conversation of one of the best all-time high school football coaches in the state. But, you know, I think it now creates an argument where you can say he is the best high school head coach in the entire state, and that the state has ever seen, and certainly that's up for debate. There's a lot of good high school football coaches that have come through Colorado over the years, but Dave Logan is certainly in that conversation. All right, for Cory Lopez, Marty Cesario, and the rest of the crew, I'm Brian Roth.